Got it.
Hi, Dani. Thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Dani. I grew up in America. I've been living in England for 11 years. I've worked out here, I guess, that whole time. I'm 34. That's the key pieces.
What brought you to England?
My master's degree. I did my master's in literature, and so I'd done a direct exchange program, and then I came back for my master's, and I just stuck around.
What are your favorite authors or pieces of literature?
Oh gosh, I really like Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. That's one of my favorite science fiction novels. I did my master's thesis actually in science fiction, or on science fiction. And so I do love, I love some of the oldies but goodies like Brave New World, pieces like that.
Yeah, I read. I mean, I think it's so interesting. I was reading. What is the War of the Worlds, written in like
Oh,
1900,
yeah.
something like that, and it's just amazing how much they got right even before we started sending probes to places.
Yeah. I mean, some of it gets right, some of it is, you know, just stuff, but it's fun. It's fun anyway. And it's usually a commentary on humanity, isn't it? So that's always interesting.
I, it's true. Did you study kind of like way that science fiction has, I guess, has been embraced, adopted, expanded, created by different like cultures, or was it just English?
No, so I looked at it was like post-humanism and the blurring of boundaries within science fiction, and how we're becoming more and more familiar with that boundary blurring and its representations in science fiction, and looking at like what do exactly are we saying constitutes a cyborg, and how social media is affecting that blurring reality.
Yeah, I mean, I guess today it's very common for people to have headphones, maybe even close to 24/7, with the Apple iPod.
Yeah,
And
well, and things like, how perception of yourself or perception by others of yourself can change based on how they see you presented on social media, and kind of the concept of like, which is the real you? Is it the one that you present in reality, or is the one you present in a sort of virtual reality, and how those things are blurring?
yeah, I, another aspect of that same question about the real you is, you have like your authentic self that's just like you naturally, and then you have yourself that's trying to improve. Is that you just faking it until you're making it, or are you still you?
I mean, who can say? And also, we have ourselves that we present to different audiences, right? As well, we have ourselves that's at home with our family. We have ourselves for work, and some lucky characters, maybe that self never changes and it's just perfectly stable. But I'd say for most people, there's the different versions of the self. But that's getting more into philosophy, right? Different versions of the self is more of a philosophical question. But literature also deals with philosophical questions, of course.
Have you read any science fiction recently that you really like?
Oh gosh, no, I have been well into escapism fantasy, full blown, just YA escapism fantasy, which I think is totally acceptable considering. And Serpent and Dove series has been great. I love that one.
That's awesome. Well, I guess science fiction is becoming like science fact, like regularly. I don't
Hmm.
know if you watch Star Trek. I mean, I imagine.
Yes, yes. I'm watching Picard right now, actually.
Are you okay?
A little late to the party, but
I watched the first few episodes like as they came out, and then I haven't really kept up with it. So I
it's just really a joy to see Jean-Luc Picard again, isn't it?
it's
That's
true.
I'm just like, oh, it's so nice to see him. The nostalgia.
But I feel like Star Trek sort of provided that um, common view of what a positive future looked like. We would be traveling in space. We would be able to create what we wanted as we needed to. We would be able to communicate across distances, and
Mhm.
it became like a common language for us to talk about. This is the communicator from Star Trek, and this is like the tricorder from Star Trek, and this is the transporter from Star Trek.
Mm.
Um, I was wondering if you felt the same way about maybe Star Trek.
I think it depends. Well, it depends. I feel like, and then actually, when you get into the Picard series, the kind of utopia ideal breaks down as well, which I think is probably somewhat more relevant into where we are. Because at the moment, I think there are absolutely benefits of going to the moon and exploring wider places and places to be. But when it comes to understanding like how we are going to reasonably legalize or not legalize things and what that's actually going to look like, I think the problems of humanity will likely follow us unless we solve the problems of humanity first. So I think that's where we are realistically. It's all good and wonderful to explore, but there are still problems.
Yeah, I guess it's like that Buddhist saying, wherever you go, you'll be there too, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so will poverty and drug addiction and all of the things that come with it.
um, but I guess dystopian novels have become very common.
Mhm,
And like, I mean, Star Wars, for example, is definitely not a vision of a hopeful future that we want to
mhm.
get to, but Star Trek is. And you're right, Picard's kind of like, gone more into that dystopian way. But I mean, I feel like that we really don't have like a common view of what a good future looks like. And I was just wondering what you thought about that.
No, I mean, I don't think we have a common view of what a good future looks like because that's a question of morality and ethics, and morality and ethics are so subjective that how do you even start to deal with it, right? And when you're looking at things like, let's say, drug addiction, for example, there are people who will say like these people are morally corrupt for having drug addiction problems, when in a lot of cases that's not quite the reality. There's a lot of other factors that play into that, like poverty and the general pieces that cause people to be into a state where those are sometimes the last vestiges of hope. So how do we get people onto a sort of moral plane? And I think that's really difficult. And I think when you bring religion obviously into that, that's even more difficult because religion has different morality and ethics, but you can't obviously tell people to just forget religion. That's not going to work either. So I think until we can get to some sort of understanding of what is morally right or not right. And then of course you have that with politics too, right? Where now our morality and our concept of ethics are actually feeding into our morality. And that's where you get this huge divide, because it's become no longer a debate about candidates or policies. It's very much around who, like, what we value and believe in. um, so if anything, I think we're getting a bit more divided currently. I don't think it'll last forever. These things come in roundabouts, but until we get into a sort of level space, it's going to be difficult to say that those things won't follow us.
Um, I think it's kind of interesting to think, look at all the conflict in the U.S. As an example, especially around politics and the divisiveness, and it feels very upsetting and unsettling. But on the other hand, whenever you sort of look at the history, I mean, we've had presidential assassinations, we've had people kill each other in the Senate, we've had a civil war, and I think in many ways, this time's not much different than the past, but we know the
Agreed.
outcome of the past. We know we survived that, but we're kind of still on our edge of our seats about the current time.
Yeah, and then you also have the debates around why are people using their money to go and explore space, right? What's the goal of that? And when you think about things like Puerto Rico, for example, becoming a huge tax haven for like cryptocurrency people, there is like a concern that, like, okay, so if the richest people in the world, make it to space, what's going to happen to space? Like, is the moon suddenly going to become a huge tax haven? Because you could see it reasonably happening. It sounds ridiculous, but you could kind of see that happening, because it would only be a privileged few who could go up there in the first place.
Yeah, it'd be like what, the new Ireland, I guess. Not the new Ireland, the new Iceland, wherever the tax haven was that Apple and everybody else is like.
Well, I know Puerto Rico has become a huge one. My sister lives in Puerto Rico, and the prices out there are wild. It's like I'm literally 45K a month for like a 3-bedroom apartment. It's nuts out there at the moment.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I had no idea. I couldn't believe it when she told me. But like it's one of those things, like you kind of look at who's going into space and the people, and it feels I think for, the rest of us, it feels so unattainable. That there's obviously questions like, we have so much going on down here. It's not that it's not useful for scientific research, but when you have like billionaires who are just sending stuff into space and creating like extravagant getaways, it seems so far from reality and most people's reality. And it's like it ends up being begrudged, right? It ends up being, people get angry at that because it seems like just an absolute waste, and a very visible waste of money to people who need money and are just scraping by.
Hmm. But a lot of people argue, it's not like they're sending the money to space, that money is actually going to jobs and to people here on Earth.
I mean, how much does it take to make a rocket? How much do the parts to make cost?
Well,
And
that's
how are
it's
those parts
true.
going into space? So I mean, like quite literally, all I'm saying is like, as devil's advocate, quite literally, they are sending money into space. But I do see your point, and yes, they are making jobs, but then those jobs are only for people who have a certain level of education, right? So the number of people who are actually getting those jobs are generally going to be people who are privileged with education. I'm not saying I'm not one of those people, but I'm saying I come from a family who isn't, which gives a kind of interesting insight into what it looks like to, from like both perspectives. I'm not saying that those jobs aren't valuable. I'm just saying that they're still unattainable for a lot of people as well.
Oh, what do you see as being like the major problem facing humanity at this moment in time? I mean, you mentioned equality.
I think
What?
I think it's changing morality, actually. I think we're having a real shift in our morality and our concept of ethics, and that's causing a huge divide between people who, because in younger generations, the even like the way, even the perspective of religion is changing and how religion should function in day-to-day life. And I think that's causing a really huge gap with people, because some people are not able, they're not wanting to change, and some people are wanting things to change very quickly, and people are just in different modes.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like, what do you keep and what do you leave behind? Every time you
Yeah.
move. Uh,
And who decides that, right? Who's in a position to decide what you keep and leave behind?
I know. I guess theoretically, individually, we all are, and we kind of like those decisions add up
But
collectively.
therein lies the rub. Because individually we all are, but my version of good is not your version of good.
Well, tell me about your version of good.
Uh my gosh. Let me see. My version of good is, wow, that's a loaded question. Why did I back myself into this corner? um phew, I'm sorry. I'm like, my version of good is freedom with guardrails, but of course, who decides the guardrails, and how are those guardrails like decided, in the sense of like, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned, I guess, actually, now that I think about it, it's more like do what thou wilt, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. Generally speaking, that's my kind of thought process. And ideally, if it doesn't hurt yourself too, but we all can't win all the things. But generally speaking, do what you got to do in life, but don't hurt other people, and don't force other people to do anything they don't want to do, as long as it doesn't hurt other people, right?
It's like freedom of speech as long as everybody says the right thing.
Well, no, as long as it doesn't hurt other people. But then, of course, that's subjective too. So this is a real philosophical rabbit hole, because
Yeah.
I've probably said stuff in the past that's hurt other people that I didn't realize hurt other people, and that I think would be like people being overly sensitive. So it's tough.
It is.
It's tough, is what it is.
Well, I have a question. So the moon is constantly being bombarded by craters, and it's been irradiated by the sun, and it has no apparent life on it of any type. What is the difference between like nature doing those things to the moon and humanity, like going there and mining it or building a base there? Do you see any difference between those two?
Yes and no. I think that nature in and of itself, if we're not talking like the animal kingdom, isn't inherently greedy. So not that all humans are, but I think there is a desire for more and more and more and more. Like, right, if you get a little bit of research or you find a little bit of something, then it's like, okay, then we'll dig here and we'll find more and we'll find more. And that can cause to like overdoing it. Whereas crater is hitting the moon, it's not like a crater is going to go, we need to all gang up on the moon, and we need to all hit the moon constantly for over a period of 50 years. Whereas humanity is a little bit more like that.
We take things to an extreme sometimes.
Yeah. I think it can, over deforestation, those sorts of things, where we've already seen this happen. So like, it's not like it's a new concept for us. It's just whether we can regulate it.
Well, I did have a few questions I wanted to ask you. I noticed that the time's slipping away. But so did you know that we were planning to send people back to the moon for the first time since 1972?
I just assumed we'd been doing it for a bit. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I thought like we'd done it a couple of more times. I didn't realize it'd be the first time since 1972, and I'm a bit surprised at that. Like, I know we've sent like stuff up there, and I guess I kind of always assumed a couple of people had also joined in at some point or another. I clearly have not been paying attention that much.
Well, you're not alone in that. I've talked to people and they're like, "Isn't that where the astronauts have been going?" It's like they're kind of surprised as well.
Yeah.
And what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think it'll be great to see. Like, I'll definitely be watching it. I'll be excited to see what happens. Um, I trust scientists going up to the moon and like astronauts. Like, I'm excited. I'm excited to watch it. I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to be cool.
Um, and if it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
Yeah, definitely.
Like, how far would you go? Just to orbit? Would you go to the moon? Would you immigrate to Mars?
Yeah, I might immigrate to Mars.
Okay, so now imagine this: your great 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 granddaughter grew up on Mars all her life, and she's having to do a paper for history. What was Earth like before we went back to the moon? That type of thing. And she sees this video. Is there something that you think would be good for her to include in her paper?
Uh, Sorry, I'm just thinking here. The world you have is a precious resource, wherever that is. Be careful what you do with it.
Seems like wise advice.
I hope so. We'll see. It could just end up being a casino, just all of Mars, just a whole big casino. That could be fun too. I may have just stolen that from Futurama though, now that I think about it.
The ultimate Las Vegas.
Yes.
do you think humanity will ever expand beyond the Earth so that Earth is just one of the many places that humans are, or do you think we'll always be sort of Earth centric?
I think it will expand beyond Earth. But I think back to my previous point, it's who gets to that becomes the possible barrier there. Um, Keep us all us underlings earthbound, maybe. I don't know. I hope that's not the case. I'd like to have more faith. I really would.
Who do you consider not an underling?
Oof. I think once you're reaching like the ability to affordably go into space on a regular basis, you're probably doing pretty okay with kind of the costs we're at now. It's not that I consider people, again, this is subjective, right? Because I'm super privileged to some people as well, and I know that. And then other people would think of me as just a worker bee. So it's kind of hard to say. But I guess when I look at it, I think definitely we're talking multimillionaires, billionaires, sort of people who can afford to use money as purely a tool for like flights of fancy.
But you know, a lot of those people, they didn't start out in life that way.
I know, no, I know. And I'm not mad at them for having the money. I'm not mad at them for having the money. I'm not mad at them for using the money the way that they are. What I'm cautious of is how morality, or is like kind of how your kind of sense of ethics can change, depending on who you're close to and how close you are to people who are different from you. That's where diversity is important, right? Diversity of thought and diversity of people being present in your life. If all you surround yourself is with other people who think like you, have the same level of income you do, and you don't understand anyone else's struggles, you forget about it, very simply. So I don't think it's necessarily that, oh, they're all evil. I think that it's more that it's important to ensure there is diversity of thought in those scenarios, especially when we're looking at how we're going to, let's say, lay out these new worlds and what that's going to look like, and how there's going to be an infrastructure to support all of those people.
Yeah, I've been thinking about kind of rich people and the moral question a little bit. And there's one aspect that I wanted to kind of test out with you, and that was you don't realize the impact you have on the people around you. Something as simple as where to go for lunch, as an example.
Right.
You might choose, a rich person might choose a really expensive place, not realizing that you know, the other people going to the lunch really, you know, that represents such a much larger proportion of their
Yeah.
income than that. I mean, what they would just toss away would actually be a significant amount of income for
Yeah. Like
these
it's
other
like the
people.
cost of an anniversary date is like their lunch.
Right.
you know? And so it's like how, but like, is that immoral? No. But is it just kind of thoughtless? Yes.
Yeah. And the thing is, you know, just completely unaware. I went to Mexico City during December, and you know, I kind of had that sense too there. You know, it's like you have all these street vendors and people have very different lives. You know, I just wonder, you know, what they thought of us, what their life was like, you know, that type of thing. So
Yeah. No, I mean that's a problem with like with living in this world, or like even like having the privilege that like I do, for example, is I even have the time to think about this. Like most people don't even have the time to think about this. They're busy. They have like lots of stuff to do, bills to pay, kids to take care of. So even being able to have the time to think about the ethical impact of the diversity of thought within space organizations is such a privilege. So I don't know. I don't know how to solve it. I don't think I'm the person to be very clear.
well, I think ultimately we all solve it between us. So you're definitely a
Yeah,
participant.
that's true. Collaboration.
Yeah,
Collaboration is key, right?
it is. Um, so I'm planning to interview a person today to the end of 2024, and I chose 2024 because that was the year that we were planning to land people on the moon when I started the project. So it's kind of slipped out a year. But I was wondering, are there any questions that you think would be good for me to ask people?
Um, I think including a question about the moral or ethical impact could be useful. I think I'd love to hear what people would say about that. Like, what would be the moral or ethical impact of having societies on space? What do you think those societies would look like on space, in space? What do you think those societies would look like? That sort of thing. I'd love to hear what other people had to say about that.
Yeah, well, I'll find out.
Cool.
Well, Dani, I really appreciate your time. I know we talked about a lot, but was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, I think I filled the space.
I really appreciate you signing up and talking to me. It was a lot of fun, and I'll have to follow up with you on some of your science fiction favorites.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Okay, have a good rest of your day. Bye bye.
You too. Bye.